What's up, guys? Welcome back to NFT Talks podcast. I'm your host, Sean, and today I have the co-founder of Wax Blockchain. His name is William Quigley. He has been around the NFT space for a good while now. As somebody who's got skin in the game, considered an OG, he's seen everything happen to what it was to what it is now. He's been through that journey, and he talks about his journey within this episode, from working for Disney to actually building the Wax Blockchain. Now, if you're into the NFT space, if you're interested in how things are changing, where the NFT space might go in the future, this is a guy that has a lot of knowledge, and we're talking about his experience of .com era, and he's relating it to the NFT space and saying how he sees a lot of similarities. So guys, this is one not to be missed. Get your notepads out, share this, subscribe, and let's help build this community. Welcome back to the NFT Talks podcast, and today's guest, I'm excited to have him on. I've been waiting for a while to arrange this episode, and it's somebody who has a lot of skin in the game, I would say. You consider him an OG in the NFT space. So much to talk about. He's a co-founder of Wax Blockchain, which is also known as the King of NFTs, because it's the only blockchain that is built for NFTs. So it's exciting to get him on. Welcome, William Quigley. How you doing?
Hi, thank you. Very good. 2021 has been the best year ever for NFTs.
It has. It's exciting. I mean, for anyone that doesn't know who you are, which we're definitely going to jump into, is just give them a short introduction into a bit about yourself and your background and what you've been doing for the past how many years?
Right. Well, I graduated from college 5 years ago. Just kidding. Let's see. So briefly, the part that's relevant. Well, I had left the Walt Disney Company. I was the CFO of the licensing division back in the 90s. I went and I co-founded a venture capital firm called Idea Lab Capital Partners. That firm was the first venture capital firm to focus exclusively on consumer internet. And at the time, believe it or not, people didn't think the internet was worthy of a dedicated focus for a fund. And by taking the consumer internet part of it, they were like, you're talking about a tiny piece of a tiny piece. I still remember some of the people we approached for money telling me, there's only already 2,000 websites in the world. Like, why would we need more? What else is there? And every time I mention that to crowds, especially in the blockchain space, everybody kind of giggles and says, "Oh, weren't they unaware and kind of clueless?" But you know what? Every single technology innovation, I've seen the exact same thing. In the 80s, it was, why would you ever need a computer at home?
Yeah.
Go to school and get a computer. And then, of course, with blockchain, what even less than 2 years ago, there were prominent people, not in the crypto space, who were coming in, who were saying, we don't understand why you would ever need anything more than Bitcoin. So people generally cannot fully figure out what the impact of a technology is going to be until long after the fact. But to wrap up about me, so I did the venture capital thing. I've been a venture capitalist for over 20 years. However, in the late 90s, I started to work with somebody who now is my partner of many, many years. And he created the very first marketplace for virtual items, for the buying and selling of video game virtual items. He did that first with a video game called Ultima Online, and then with a video game called EverQuest, and then some others that your listeners might have heard of, World of Warcraft. And then ultimately, so I got involved with him. I was on his board. And that business, the secondary market for the buying and selling of video game virtual items, got up to about $10 billion annually. We were the biggest. We sold that company right around the time of the financial crisis, and my partner wound up taking about 6 months off, but then started looking around at what he was going to do next, and he happened upon Bitcoin, the Satoshi white paper. It took him well over a year to convince me that there was anything interesting there, because all venture capitalists have scar tissue from previous deals.
Yeah.
In the 90s, there were attempts to make magic internet money. Things like beans and flues were coins you could send back and forth to each other. The only problem was, since there wasn't a blockchain attached to those tokens, you didn't know how many there were.
Yeah.
And so people didn't have confidence. Of course, at the time, we really didn't know even how to address that problem. So the blockchain clearly did it. But once I decided that the blockchain was the place to be, I actually listened to my partner. I gave him 3 hours. I said, you have 3 hours to convince me, because you've been talking and babbling about this forever. Within 3 days, I got off 8 boards. I stopped doing everything else I was doing. And I said, all right, from now on, we're just going to do blockchain. And that was, 10 years ago.
Wow.
And what we did, which I think was part of why we were so successful, I took the template of what we had done in the internet and how we had first started at the infrastructure layer. Then we went up and we did applications, e-commerce sites, music sites, travel sites. Then we started looking at how do we actually bring customers to those sites, so ad networks, lead gen platforms, and then we realized that payments was a bottleneck, so we addressed the payments issue. We were the first institutional investors in PayPal, and so we always had a view of sort of blanketing a space, looking at it and then finding all of the friction points or the pain points of what we thought would be a big market, and then tried to back businesses that were addressing each of those pain points. We used that same playbook with crypto. We probably invested in and incubated in over 30 crypto companies. Obviously, some of the early ones are Kraken, Coinbase, Bitfury, BitGo, and a whole bunch of others. Then we incubated crypto payment processing companies. Obviously, we then started looking at blockchains themselves. We created something called Mastercoin. We were I think we were the biggest investors in that, on the board of that company. That was the predecessor, by the way, to Ethereum. It was the first attempt to put a smart layer on top of a blockchain, what we now call smart contracts. The team from there left because we built it on the Bitcoin blockchain, and the Bitcoin community didn't really support it. In fact, their question to us was, why would anyone need an intelligent layer on a blockchain? And so I thought it was self-evident. So if you're asking that question, you're probably not the right chain. And so it was very risky back then to do what the Ethereum team did. So the guys at Mastercoin left Mastercoin and started Ethereum.
Okay.
And, we became the second largest investors in the Ethereum crowd sale because we knew a smart contract layer was valuable. We also knew its limitations. We had built Tether on Mastercoin, and Tether, initially hard to sell to people. Why would anyone need a stable coin? It was the world's first, but eventually, today, if you look at it, Tether is the most traded cryptocurrency on earth, maybe $20 trillion annually. Half of Bitcoin trading pairs are with Bitcoin, are with Tether. But it was during 2015, 16, as Ethereum started to launch, that we realized, hey, maybe we could take this next generation of in-game items, now called skins, and a skin is a video game virtual item that's strictly cosmetic. In other words, it has no in-game utility.
Yeah.
And it looks like, if people know what an NFT is in the from a media file standpoint, they'd say, "Oh, that looks a little bit like a skin." And so we decided we would launch a blockchain that was just focused on skins. And I did that in 2017 in London. And I remember I presented to an audience who were like, "Why would you want media files on a blockchain?"
Okay, you get the questions all the time. Why would you want this? Why would you want that?
And in particular, I realized something. Everyone in the audience looked like gamers, kind of geeky computer people, but it turned out they really weren't. A lot of the early crypto traders, like us, were video gamers. We were video game item traders. Well, we had a perspective. They did not. And so CryptoKitties hadn't been launched yet. People really didn't know what you say NFT. People didn't know what that word meant.
Yeah.
But we knew once we got a consensus mechanism that would allow fast enough processing, this would be, and I think that video is still probably on YouTube of me. I said, look, this will be the on-ramp to consumer mass adoption of blockchain. And I'm very proud of that, because 4.5 years later, this now people think of it as self-evident that, of course, but as you know, it was not until 2021 where anyone seemed to care. We were talking to companies for 2-3 years, and they were like, "Well, why would we care about this stuff?" And we made some really impressive, I think, innovations in NFTs. We were the first to link an NFT to a real world consumer product. And we call those viral NFTs, virtual plus in real life. And those, we've now done them with a lot of big brands, especially in the toy space, Funko, Mattel, and Hasbro, and a lot of other brands that have said, this is a really cool idea. Target and Walmart and the Topps baseball card trading company, we did it with them. So this will have a profound effect over time on consumer products industry. So that's sort of a background for your listeners about what I've been up to. Definitely last.
Yeah, I mean, you've covered so much, but I think it was needed, and I'm glad you did. You went back like way before NFTs, talked about the internet, talked about the doubters there. Like that's what I feel when I first looked at NFT space, and I say the penny dropped for me to understand what was going on and the possibilities, and it kind of reminded me of how people spoke about whether it was Web 0.20 social media, or how people spoke about the internet. Like at this point, it's very early. Well, I wouldn't say it's very early because you were very early, but it's still early and people are still asking questions about it. Why would we do this? Why is there any need for this? Why would we do that? And that seems to be the running trend, like you said, through tech, when tech's created innovation, people ask these questions. But to see someone like yourself here that has kind of took that journey from the internet to looking into blockchain to being early on the space in NFTs and still here, that kind of solidifies that this is something that's going to be around. And it's not really so much around art, because I think it's art driven at this point, we call the JPEGs and whatnot, but the technology behind and the possibility of what brands can do, or the use of virtual goods like digital fashion, or whether it's music, it's going to disrupt everything. I mean, a lot of people focus on the creative side, but I still think it's going to disrupt things like, how about the health sector? And like, for example, the way we travel and passports and stuff like that, I'm sure that would be something we could tap into, right?
All those things are true. NFTs are not media files. That's the way most people have come to know them. They're images, they're video clips, they're snippets of audio. And that's been important, because a technology that doesn't have something intuitive and familiar, it generally just sits there and is unexploited because people can't get their arms around it. Once people see just one aspect of a technology, like what it can do, then their minds just expand. Do you know, back in the early 80s, IBM decided it was time to allow people to buy and use computers at home. And I remember the commercials. There was a Charlie Chaplin figure, you've probably seen on YouTube, and he would sit down. And now as an adult, I know why it was a Charlie Chaplin figure, because people assumed Charlie Chaplin wasn't. He was kind of an idiot.
Yeah.
So if they had some computer geeky looking guy, it'd be intimidating. But Charlie Chaplin wasn't intimidating, so it was probably smart marketing. But what they did is they presented a computer as a spreadsheet for doing your bookkeeping, and then they presented it as a way to type. And so people thought, oh, I do bookkeeping, I need a computer, or I type and I need a computer. Now, but if you didn't type and you weren't a bookkeeper, it's like, what would I need a computer for? And of course, now we can look at it and say, but it's just a general purpose digital machine. But, those things are a result of decades of that information being presented to us in many different ways,
right,
where we finally see it as what its potential is. But early on in any new technology cycle, it's a curiosity. And then usually the first application brings about two things. A group who says, that's magnificent. I would love to use that. Now I know what it's for. And then the majority saying, that's a curious use, but not something I'll ever need, so I don't need it. And often what I do is I tell people when they say, aren't NFTs a fad? And why are you putting all of your eggs in this basket? And I say, imagine you have a smartphone and on it you're playing in the Angry Birds game, right? And after a couple of months you get bored at the Angry Birds game. And you say, you know what? I don't play this game anymore. I should throw away my smartphone. And if you think of the smartphone as a presentation layer to play a video game you're bored with, you might do that. But if you think instead of the smartphone as a handheld computer and the game is just one of many applications you can do with it, then of course, what I said earlier would seem absurd.
Yeah.
That because people think of NFTs as a piece of digital art that can't be copied and can be transferred, they think, all right, limited use case. I think of NFTs differently. Here's how I would define them. An NFT is a Turing complete computer, first of all. So it is a computer you're sending back and forth. All right. And what it does is it's a thing that allows you to send something valuable to another person instantly at virtually no cost, where the recipient of that knows at virtually no cost that what you sent them is genuine.
Yeah.
Now, if you take that as a definition, you can start to say, wow, there's lots of things that I would like to send back and forth to people around the world. There's lots of things I'd like to send, but for the fact that they don't know if it's the authentic item, they can't really put a lot of money into it. But if I could get over that objection, and they would know with certainty it's real, and they wouldn't have to spend a month trying to verify it with some sort of specialist, then you start to think, wow, there are many, many things in this world that we do today that we could do better with an NFT, but also this is where it gets exciting as a venture capitalist. There are things that could not be done previously that now can be done. And that's where real value creation comes about, in doing something that could not be possible before.
I was going to say, just put things in perspective based on what you just said, is like, for example, when people are trying to buy, say, a expensive watch, and you can go on the internet and you're looking for this watch, and you might get 3 or 4 sites, one that says the watch is this much, and the one that says the watch is $3 cheaper. And how do you ever know? How do you ever know which one is the real one? I mean, I think once this applies for, like, for example, Rolex, whether they do it on their own blockchain or they create their own NFTs, it simply just solves that problem for counterfeits and all that stuff, doesn't it? Especially for luxury goods.
Yeah. I mean, when I was at Disney, we had 15,000 licensees across the world.
Yeah.
And at the time, especially, counterfeited merchandise was rampant in China. and some other countries. And so there was it was like well, it's like, you know, drugs. You can never really stamp it out. And so Disney would you know, work with local law enforcement in various countries, and they would do high profile raids and whatnot.
Yeah.
But the reality was it would always be there, and that Disney logo or that Mickey Mouse image. You could get a video file of it anywhere, and then make a T-shirt, a waffle iron, you know, a watch. And the reality is, consumers have no real ability to verify the authenticity of most things. What I believe is that NFTs and blockchain-based tokenized items, you can say as a category, are the only thing on Earth that someone can know with certainty instantly at no cost that it's the genuine item. Now, I would love for your audience to come up with something that meets that test. But I've thought long and hard about it, and remember the conditions I imposed on that statement, that I can give you something and you don't know who I am. So this is a trustless transaction. You can't rely on your trust in me to validate something. I give you something, you now possess it, but you with anything else other than, let's say, an NFT, know with certainty, with doing no work on your part, that the item is genuine. And by the way, no cost in order to confirm that it's genuine. I mean, people would always, and back 4, 5, 6 years ago, when I would talk about this kind of stuff, they'd say, but I can just give you a diamond, or I can give you a $100 bill, or I can give you a piece of gold. And to me, anyone who puts any thought at all into that, I mean, a $100 bill, I mean, North Korea counterfeits those daily. We don't have the ability ourselves. I mean, the Secret Service or the Treasury Department can figure that out. And a diamond, synthetic diamonds, have reached a point where they're indistinguishable from naturally made diamonds. And of course, gold, I don't know about you, but I don't have a local assay testing firm that I can go to, or that I could even trust, to believe. So it's really kind of, it's remarkable, this thing, right? A digital format transferred anywhere that can be easily and at no cost determined to be genuine. This is why the high-end art arena is so intrigued by this, because can you imagine people just sending back and forth $1, $2, $3 million, $70 million physical pieces of art constantly, and there being no time whatsoever to validate if it's real?
Yeah,
no way.
It's crazy. That's actually reporting that's what's actually happening at this point. Like, people are just exchanging millions of dollars of value of art, like, day by day, and that, you're right, that would never happen, and there's no question of authenticity or nothing like that. So yeah, to even like to point out that, I know it's happening, but kind of, when you're in this space, you can't just get on with it. But to point that out, I've never really thought about that, is the volume that is traded, and trustless, like I said, nobody questions whether it's real or not because of the blockchain technology. So yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that, because these things are important to the reason why this NFT space is going to grow and carry on.
Indeed. And you know, like I said, I've thought about this for a long time. I mean, it is true for most consumers that there are trust nodes. I would say, like, Amazon is a trust node. That is an entity you can interact with on the internet, where, for the most part, most people who give Amazon their credit card and buy a T-shirt, or, you know, buy whatever, a watch or something, they have a great deal of faith that that the credit card's not going to be misused, and that in return for giving Amazon that credit card, they're going to have an item shipped to them. And of course, this is what another way for your consumers, listeners, to think about. This is what branding is about. branding is about presenting a something to consumers that they can believe and trust in. So when you eat some cereal, in the morning, maybe it's Nabisco or Kellogg's, you very few people dedicate time to say, I wonder if this is used with products that I wouldn't want to eat. It's just not. We've been so conditioned through endless interactions with that brand that have turned out favorably that that humans were pattern recognizing creatures. We say, look, this has happened enough that I'm now going to assume it is always the case.
Yeah.
And that the thing about that is, though, how many billions, tens of billions, did those companies spend on marketing and on service over decades to communicate that they can be trusted with the consumers? It's it's remarkable, and yet you can do the same thing on a blockchain at virtually no cost, and that's what's so incredible. Branding will not go away, but the brand will no longer need to establish first that what they're giving you is a genuine thing.
Yeah.
And this hurt Disney a lot back in the 90s when counterfeiting was so rampant, because obviously the counterfeiters hadn't invested billions of dollars in establishing a trusted relationship with the consumers. So their products were low quality. But of course, if you bought something that you thought was from the Walt Disney Company and it fell apart, or it, I remember somebody had these like Donald Duck pens, writing pens that were counterfeit, and they leaked all over some woman's couch. And she came into the Disney store and said, you ruined my couch. And the employees were like, that's not even our item. But what did Disney do? They paid like $1,500 for a woman to get a new couch. And I remember being in that meeting, and the discussion was just, she believes it to be true.
Yeah.
And so, we're failing at counterfeit reduction. So the whole idea of trustless networks and systems is new to consumers, but at some point it will be common, and that we don't know where that's going to take us, but it's going to be massively bigger even than it is today.
100%. I agree, man. I agree with everything you just said. Like the whole aspect of branding, like it's everything you're saying is pretty much on point. And I think it's great that you explain it in that way for the listeners or viewers to understand the importance of what's about to happen or what's happening as we speak within the space. But what I want to get into, which I think is important too, is to talk about Wax blockchain, because, and this is what I feel is my opinion, is that Wax isn't, when people are entering the space, Wax isn't really brought up as a blockchain. Ethereum, obviously, because a lot of these projects are built, and these popular projects are built on Ethereum, but you guys have built for NFTs. Ethereum, if people do the research, Ethereum wasn't built for NFTs. It's for smart contracts and decentralized finance. So it makes sense for people to look at you. But why do you think that is? Because you guys are much more built and scalable, and gas fees we're going to talk about and so on. That makes a lot more sense for people to build on top of your blockchain. Now, this is not me taking sides. I'm just stating facts. So tell me a bit about Wax, and why do you think that is the case?
Well, so Wax, as you said, it was purpose built. We built it for what we called skins at the time, but now NFTs. And that required a whole ecosystem that I think just now other blockchains are starting to understand. We knew, because we had been doing video game virtual item trading, what was needed. You needed a wallet that was really easy for most people to use. We looked at a lot of the different wallets that were used in video game item trading, and we sort of took the best elements of all of those. The Wax Cloud wallet started this year in 2021 at about 500,000 NFT collectors. That was after 3.5 or so years. And since January of this year till now, in November of 2021, we have 8.5 million. So it's like more than 15x fold. So people are seeing it. I think 2 of the top 5 video games by users are Wax games. And if you compare this to like Ethereum, it's virtually impossible to have a game by any definition of that word on Ethereum, because of course, today I looked, the cost for a transaction is 23 US. And the average value or the median value exchange is $7 as of today. You're transferring $7 and you're paying 23. That's and so we obviously knew Ethereum well. We knew about layer 2, and so which is just a ledger that exists on top of Ethereum. And then what you can do is you can run transactions on your layer, and in order to get the benefit of the security and the power of Ethereum, you batch a bunch of transactions together, and you wait until the costs go down because they fluctuate. Ethereum has what those who use Uber understand to be surge pricing. So whenever there's a surge in demand, the price to transfer goes up, and that's the way they deal with the queue. They don't make you wait in order of when your transaction arrived to be processed. What they say is you can go to the front of the line, you just have to pay up. And so, but that makes it highly variable because the demand cycle just is almost random, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's $20 and sometimes it's $100 to transfer. So what we thought was we needed at Wax, we needed a complete system, one that had no fees. So there are no fees to transfer. We had a wallet that clearly, by the growth of it, people really like, and it's easy to use. And no, you log in with like your Facebook credentials or your PayPal credentials or Google credentials. You don't have to put in all the other information. We have hundreds and hundreds of games on Wax today that integrate with the Wax Cloud wallet. So you go to that game and you just log in through your Wax account, and then you're in the game, and you can transfer your items back and forth quite easily, your NFTs. We also knew you needed a marketplace, so we created those. And then you needed a decentralized exchange to allow somebody to exchange the in-game items, the NFTs and the in-game currencies, for either other game currencies and items, or for things like Wax or some other token, fungible token that could be traded on an exchange for real money. So we thought about that 5 years ago, right? All what we would need. And so we built it. And so as a blockchain, it is the #1 blockchain in the world by transactions. I didn't look this morning, but it's maybe 15 to 18 million transactions a day.
Wow.
And you can compare that to Ethereum, which is 1 million, 1.5 million. So as an NFT spot, it has more active daily users than any other chain. To put that in perspective, if you look at like Alien Worlds, it's a game. Splinterlands is one of our games. It's also on a chain called Hive. Farmer's World.
Yeah.
Those will have hundreds of thousands of people using them a day. Now you compare that to a lot of other blockchains, and you can go to a site called DAPP radar.com and look. Take my word for it. But you look by users, and it's hundreds of thousands of people per day on these apps on Wax, and then it's thousands or hundreds. One of the things in these other chains, one of the things that blows me away is some of these so-called metaverses. Some of them, Decentraland is one, which is a great project, and Sandbox.
Crypto voxels.
These chains, these blockchain projects, they have a few dozen to a few hundred users a day. And so it's baffling to me why people have rushed in and pumped those tokens so much. I think yesterday when I looked at Sandbox, which has a $16 billion US market cap, fully diluted, it had 198 users. all day for 24 hours.
Wow.
Now, think about that. Decentraland is usually between 50 and maybe 250 users a day. And then Wax is hundreds of thousands of users a day. So part of that, by the way, is you hear all these chains talk about very low fees, right? The Ethereum layer twos have a bunch of people touting them as, oh, these things are really, really cheap. Well, they range from Polygon, which is 25 cents to 30, 40 cents per transaction, up to, I forget the one that's the cheap, the most.
Palm.
What's that?
Is it Palm, by chance?
Maybe. There's like 5 or 6.
There's a few of them in it. There's Palm.
Yeah, those range from, they're zero knowledge proof based layer twos. They range maybe 25 cents to $3 per transaction. Now, when you have 20 million transactions, that's 5 million to 10 million per day. So you can see why so many people are building on Wax and playing games on Wax, because zero is a lot less than even 25 cents. And so now, as far as you said, so why don't more people know about it? I think the users clearly know about it because it's the most actively used chain in the world.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people who just trade the tokens, they buy the story. So they don't realize that Decentraland has 100 users a day. I mean, would you pay billions of dollars for an Apple app that had 100 users a day?
Yeah, no, you wouldn't.
And some people say, well, wait a minute, William, that's not fair. It will one day. All right, but those projects have been around for 3 years. So now maybe they get there, but I believe most of what we call the Metaverse-based chains, Wax is one, these others are out there. Most of those will not transition to what will ultimately be the real Metaverse as we fantasize about it. The term Metaverse has been so abused by the marketing departments of blockchain companies that it's disappointing. I actually think, and now with the Facebook and Meta, I think the term needs to just be put away, because it meant something. It was really going to mean, when the arrival of augmented reality devices came, low cost, wearable glasses, which would provide you with a digital overlay of the real world. So a blending of the real and the non-physical world. That's what most of us thought of as Metaverse. That is not what we have today. Today, what we have are really awful video game-like experiences that look very similar to what we had in the like mid 90s. If you look at a Fortnite or a PUBG or a CS:GO or some of the fantasy RPG games, whatever they are, League of Legends, those are magnificent worlds with millions of people in them each day. That is not what we have today. And so to call them metaverses is really kind of lame.
Crushing a few dreams here, man. I think you're going to make a few people unhappy. the reality of what you're saying. But it's true.
If you're a video gamer, you've never touched a blockchain-based quote metaverse or game. And then you were to go, you would be baffled. Now, what I would say to those people is be a little forgiving, because just like the first PC games, and then the first Flash or browser-based games, and then the first mobile games. The very first mobile game I played was by a company called Jamdat that everybody's forgotten about. It was based on the Opera operating system for these like flip phones. And what it would do is it would allow you to take a little line, like a dotted line that you would type. It would send that dotted line down to what was a 0, and it was a bowling game. And I remember the guy was showing me, see this? And I was like, yeah, but that's really awful. No one would recognize that now. Somebody should do a YouTube of those early games. But the founders of Jamdat and then all the follow-on companies, they stuck with it, and eventually these became super rich, multimedia, crazy, fun experiences. It just took a lot of effort and iteration, and that will happen with blockchain. What causes a technology, let's say a gaming technology in particular, or any consumer technology to take hold, is not for it to be superior in all respects to what's come before it. That's never the case. It's usually inferior in all respects except one. And that one is missing or even couldn't be done in the former way it was done. And that one thing is so important to consumers. There was a latent desire that was not met, that it becomes just a mad rush for it. And I'll tell you, if you think about phones, I'm old enough to remember when phones were connected to walls. And then we got these wireless phones within the house, but they still could go.
I remember. And then we got the bricks of the mobile phones. And then
So back in the 80s, when phone companies were advertising to consumers, they would do things like show you the drop of a pin, and how their network was so good you could hear the drop of a pin. All right, and the notion in the U.S. of dropped calls, that was not in the vernacular. The term itself was inconceivable, because these networks had been built with what we call 5.9 reliability, which means 0.99999% of the time it is up and running. So when you got cell phones, drop calls were the norm, and they were super expensive, and the reception was often not good in all respects compared to the prior product. On a competitive comparison, the existing wired phone companies thought these things are awful, but there was one thing they offered: mobility. And that was the one thing that consumers didn't know they really wanted, but it turned out they wanted it desperately. And so blockchain-based games, they have one thing today that I've been trying for 20 years to get video game companies to understand, which is they would like to own the in-game item they pay for, and they would like to be able to trade it, barter, or for real money with other people. And video game companies, virtually all of them, have always either banned that outright or restricted it, and then banned your account if you tried to do it. And I was in that business of operating a secondary market for video game virtual.
Do you think that was to keep control? Do you think that was like to make sure they can keep control of everyone's assets and money? Because the minute you give people and they can own it, they have a chance to make money with that or to benefit from that.
I think it's such a good question, Sean, because I don't think you would get any one answer. I think the thought of, well, they now own these items and can do something with them, that thought made them uncomfortable. And they couldn't really put their finger on it. What I would always say is, you need to understand a robust, high volume, highly liquid secondary market always benefits the primary market. So you guys can sell these video game virtual items to your players, and then the fact that they can trade it, cash it in for something else, makes them much more likely to buy from you because they know they're not stuck with it. And of course, as you talked about earlier, if you were to buy an automobile or to buy a home and were told that you could never sell it, you would still have a market for automobiles and homes, but it would be a vastly smaller market. And it would be a much more carefully thought through decision. I mean, you wouldn't be able to move to take a new job. I mean, it would be terrible. So the video game companies, I think, one, they didn't really understand it. Two, there was a general unease, partially because they thought, but now you're making money off of something we did. And that is an impulse in many, many companies, many business people around the world. The notion of the open source ethos, the notion that by creating a platform or an ecosystem where all the participants can profit, and that you don't directly extract value as the creator of that from those transactions, but overall you have people coming to that place because they can make a living, and indirectly it's like you set up a city. You don't own the gas station or the retailer or the apparel shop, but there's like a sales tax. And there's also people investing in that city, wanting to build up the park system, the water system, utility system, which benefits the city. This is still a hard to grasp concept for video game companies, not to mention other businesses. They like the idea of we get something for everything done we can extract. And guess what? The blockchain-based now consumer markets with things like DeFi and blockchain games is turning that on its head. I think over the next 5 years, it's going to be highly disruptive to large industries and many consumer product industries where they've not allowed consumers to do these things. And they're going to see consumers are going to go there. They can't today easily because blockchain's still hard. But as we make it easier to onboard people, I think they're going to choose blockchain over the closed garden of an Apple App Store or a Google Play Store.
Yeah, I'll ask you a question then. So based on what you said about they're not willing to, they don't really want to part, and people benefiting from buying these assets and whatnot, as we would call it, if they did NFTs. What about smart contracts then? Because royalties. So wouldn't it be beneficial for them to, if they had, see, if they put a small percentage in the NFT that they sold, they would still make money on the secondary market whenever it's resold, probably make a hell of a lot of money. One example I like to use is going away from games, but Nike and trainers. The resale market for trainers is in the billions, and Nike don't make a penny of that. But if they make every trainer or twin, every trainer with a digital NFT, and they put royalties in there, as like if it's 1% or 0.7%, they're going to make a hell of a lot of money off the secondary market that they wasn't making beforehand. So it makes complete sense to do that. That's my logic of based on what you said.
You'd be right. I told you that we at Wax invented this NFT called a viral, which is virtual plus in real life. So connecting an NFT to a real world consumer product. The first thing we tokenized was in 2017 was a sneaker, and that sneaker traded over 200 times. So 200 times in 24 hours.
Wow.
And each time it traded, there was, I think, a 1% fee. So in total, more was made in the cumulative fees than in the retail price of the sneaker. So yes, but you are right that they can do that. But keep in mind, there weren't smart contracts in their ecosystems, right? And even if I offered that to many game companies when I was the CEO of Opskins, which was the largest marketplace in the world for skins, video game virtual items that are cosmetic. And I said, look, we can share in this. But then it gets to this insecurity around the thing they hold most dear, and that is their business model. And business models are tremendous. When you invent a new one, I mean, they're as rare as finding a new element on Earth. They're very, very rare. And the thing about business models that is, and during the internet era, business model thinking became much more advanced because in a digital environment, things are possible that weren't possible in the physical. But businesses can adapt to changes in technology. They can adapt to changes in the competitive landscape. They can adapt to regulatory changes. But a change in business model is usually an extinction event. Businesses cannot adapt. Humans have a tremendously difficult time when they are vested in one business model, adapting to another. Usually, the businesses simply go out of business. It's that hard. And so think about as a business that's a big AAA game franchise that's making a lot of money in a certain business model. Now they transition from premium sales where you would buy the physical disk to actually go install the game, to downloadable content like what Steam does, to free to play, which was extremely difficult for the U.S. video game industry to accept, and so this is now even more subversive in a way. It's the video game itself now is sort of not fully owned by you, the builder of the game. You've got these people who own parcels and items in it. I think their concern is, where does this take us? And entrepreneurs like us, we say, well, I don't know, but we'll adapt, and this is something people want. So let's see where we can go, how far down that rabbit hole. But most people who work at big companies would prefer to have very solid foundation of how they make money, and that becomes like the laws of physics that they interact with. They know that there's gravity, there's electromagnetism, thermodynamics, and they operate in that environment. And so when you impose a new law of physics on them, they struggle, and yet I find it kind of amusing that I'm seeing all these big AAA titles now that they see what's going on and the venture capitalists rushing into video games on the blockchain. They're saying, we're going to do this too. And we love this idea. And I'm like, you love this idea? Well, then, but why for 20 years have you done everything to ban it?
Yeah.
And if you do love it, okay, Fortnite, open up your skins to be traded. And CSGO, open up your skins to be traded. And League of Legends, World of Warcraft, open them up. But they don't. And I think what they're going to try to do is build games for blockchain. But what's going to happen is this. Over time, people are going to get really excited and comfortable owning these virtual items. And they're going to look at things like traditional video games and say, why am I spending thousands of dollars there? And so ultimately, those existing AAA titles are going to be disrupted by the consumers getting comfortable and desiring what they can do in the blockchain game space. It's just going to happen, and they're going to, it's just like the online the retailers of.
I'm just going to say that online retailers and retail and real life,
high street retail. They buried their heads in the sand for a long time, and finally they said, "I guess we got to do this." Yeah. So I do expect this is unfolded, by the way, the industry precisely as I thought it would. In our white paper, we talked about what we saw that was going to happen and why this was going to be a phenomenon, but that it was going to be indie game developers who would start it. And because they, frankly, have nothing to risk. Yeah. And then eventually the big guys would see the money there, usually looking at what the venture capitalists are doing, and they would come on in. So that industry will be disrupted, and some of those video games won't be able to adjust, and they will fade away.
Yeah, I'm really interested. I see this happening on an art level, or these PFP projects, celebrities coming into the space, and obviously they'll get these big corporate companies. You've got the fashion industry, Gucci, D&G coming in. They're kind of like dipping their toes in the water, but they're not really going full. They're not really going to put everything out there and actually invest time in the space and actually do things to create different things and change their business model, as you will say. So what's going to happen? Are you saying, or do you predict that these companies that have been around for a lot of time, 100 years, are going to literally fade? Well, I don't think they're going to fade out because the real world still exists, but are these new breed of companies are going to come and take over, just like the online, like Amazon, for example, Toys R Us, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think if you look at just business history, it's almost always the case that when a transformative technology is introduced, initially it's new entrants to that industry that exploit it because, again, they have nothing to lose. Yeah. And then when they figure out a way to use that for something the consumers want, then the bigger companies, usually quite reluctantly, because when you're doing really well doing something, do you really want to compete on a whole new level with people who you didn't have to compete with before? Probably not. So the impulse of some of these businesses will be to put their head in the sand, like you said, a blockbuster. And some of them will start to say, we have to do something here. My guess is, again, just looking at history, the ones that decide this is something we have to do will experiment. They'll see it's not as easy to change their culture, so they will. There'll be a wave of acquisitions. I would guess probably starting maybe next year, going forward for 2 or 3 years, there'll be a wave of acquisitions, because the hardest thing to acquire is the insight, the vision, the talent of people who have been building in that new technology for years, right? So that's what they're going to realize. If you're a blockchain-based game developer, do you want to go work for some stodgy old?
Yeah, this is it, man. This is, you're right. And like I said, like I think Facebook announced that they want to employ 10,000 devs across.
And they will, by the way, they will.
Yeah,
they won't be the best. No,
yeah.
They won't be the best. There'll be people mostly who say, "Oh, you know what? I'd like to learn this stuff too," and they will learn it. But in digital economies, which we as humans are still trying to grasp, what all these changes going on that we kind of feel. Why are they happening? Why is there so much concentration of wealth among a small number? Well, one of the reasons for that is because digital economics allows a person, a business, to serve a global audience and serve them quite rapidly. In the old days, it might take 10 years before you would expand from your host country to other countries, and now it often is done simultaneously with launch. So I think you will find many businesses simply they're going to struggle. They're not going to want to do it, but they're going to say, we have to get our toe in the water. We'll buy something. They even today, if I said to you, who do you think is more competent as a team in the e-commerce arena, Amazon or Walmart, or Amazon or some other retailer, Nordstrom? I think we would all agree, well, Amazon was natively digital, right?
Yeah.
And these other guys were analog for 100 years, and then they had to rethink it. They had to accept it.
Yeah.
They had to try to say we're going to do it, and then being very meager in what they're able to do, have to start to hire and attract talent. I've been a venture capitalist for decades. I will tell you, the talent acquisition game is extraordinarily difficult, and nearly always in the early stages, it is most important to quality people that they're joining a group of people or a CEO or a founder who's got a vision. And won't have to be dragged kicking and screaming to do that. I've been in this industry 10 years. I've watched these big companies. They don't want to believe it. You know, I was working with PayPal in 2014 on enabling PayPal to work with us at a crypto payment processor for merchants to accept crypto and then be paid in fiat. And they abandoned that after the guy who was there running it left. So there was no institutional acceptance of this. And it was only after I think Square started to sell hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin a quarter, and they're like, wow, those are high fee things, that they jumped in. So to any of your audience who is thinking of getting into this space, don't go work for a big company. Most of your time is going to be spent fighting internally this impulse on the part of people in the company to stamp this out. They want to believe it's a fad.
Yeah, of course.
They want to believe it's not going to happen. And if you've ever read about these great cases like Blockbuster and the internal discussions that went on, you start to realize this was not them not being able to understand. It was them not wanting to believe it. They were, when I was at the Walt Disney Company, Blockbuster became so important and so dominant that the Hollywood studios, who are vultures and who are really, really difficult to compete against, they went as a group to Congress and said, you need to do something about Blockbuster. They're anti-competitive.
Well,
And within 5 years of that, Blockbuster's obituary was already being written.
it's crazy. I mean, you really relayed off history and giving 2 examples of what I believe is going to happen. So yeah, I'm just like taking it all in. Like it's true. It's history repeating itself over and over again. And you just got to be on the right end. I mean, I feel I've just make sure on the right end of the stick. You're not on the consumer side. If you're a business, you've got to adjust and actually take time to look into this space while it's early, while people are still being creative and building. Before it's a case where you're playing catch up.
Let me give your audience, because I hope some of the people in the audience are people who want to break into the space.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I just recently I was talking to a gal who wanted to figure out a way to make a living in the blockchain video gaming space. So I helped her set up a Wax wallet and start to do play to earn. Her mind was blown at how much she could earn and how fun it was. And even though these games are not like as fun, if you will, as a traditional game where the graphics are beautiful and all that, what is fun is the collaborative nature of these things. She's on the phone for hours while she's doing the work in the game, and then trying to figure out, should we trade this particular item with this trading pair or that trading pair to figure out how to maximize her profit. But one of the things she said to me was, William, you told me, don't think about it, just do it, and then come back in a week. And she said, I now totally get that, and I can't believe, she's a middle-aged woman. She goes, I can't believe it's taken me this long in life to understand what you've always said to me, which is, when there's this new thing going on, you can look at it from afar and study it and just meditate on it. And that's worthless. Just jump in, and in a week, a month, a short period of time, it's going to become clear to you whether there's something there or not. But most people want to, quote, understand it. And the impulse of big companies, when I could convince them to take a serious look at blockchain, they said, we're going to form a strategic planning committee. Really? And I would say, guys, I've been in the new business development sphere for like 25 years. No, you don't do that. You know what you do? You incubate something. You just try it. And the doing will allow you to absorb the nuances of this new phenomenon, the new tech, at a pace that's 1,000 times faster than sitting there and like noodling over it in your mind. So for all those people who are like, I don't know if this is real or not, suspend your disbelief for a day, a week, a month. Just suspend it and say, all right, I'm going to check it out. I have never found anyone in 10 years who got into the blockchain space and made that first purchase of a crypto and then did something with it, maybe sold it or traded it for something else, and then realized, wow, this is actually an economic activity. This is amazing, and it's permissionless. I don't have to ask people's permission. That when that concept hits them, and it hits them viscerally because they're doing it, what happens to them is they become converts to this movement. So those are the last things I would say to your audience. Just do it. Just go into it, and a month later, make a decision. Is this real or nonsense?
I'm sure a lot of people are going to find out that way. I mean, one thing before we wrap it up, William, is I want to squeeze just a little bit more out of you. I want to dig into your mind, and I want you to tell me how you see things. How do you describe a day? How you think things are going to be with the NFT space in the next 10 years? So describe your morning as you wake up. How is NFTs involved in your world, not only in business but in everyday life? So just give like a short description of you waking up, and where do you see NFTs and what kind of things are happening?
Well, when I wake up, I usually go into Slack. That's the communication app, right, where everyone in the company is going back and forth and discussing stuff. We're a distributed workforce, global, so people have been working around the clock. So I look at often I'll go from there to Twitter, and I'll look at who's made an announcement about something that they're doing. I'll look at things like Dab Radar and see which games are trending and which aren't. And then I will focus on like some of the daily activities that I do, which is helping to build out the Wax blockchain to make it more robust, right? Because since we are the top blockchain by transactions, we're sort of seeing what the stresses are as you try to use a blockchain in a mass market capacity. So that's at the base infrastructure layer. And then I'm looking at things that we're doing. We're rolling out video games ourselves. We're rolling out improvements in the wallet. And I am always looking at novel uses of things that are already out there, like the NFTs. So when I was at the NFT conference, NFT, I noticed for the first time, by the way, that conference had like 400 people 2 years ago. It had 8,000 this year. So that tells you how big this has become. But what I noticed was for the first time, one of the, there's 5 what I think are the most transformative use cases for a blockchain. One of those is identity. And now when we think of identity, we always think of a passport or some other kind of government issued identification. Well, it can also be affiliation with a club. And what I saw each night around New York was 50, 60, 80 events going on where conference attendees who were owners of a particular NFT were being invited to go to a physical place, and their entry pass was proof of ownership of the NFT. So that was the first time I had seen that in mass. And I think that is an example of like a brand new use case. I would say in terms of what, I can't tell you what's going to happen in 10 years other than broad brush things. Every major economy will have tokenized its currency. What we did with Tether, it's rare that a technology is superior in every single respect to what came before it. That is the case of tokenizing currency. We've also are going to see many of the world's consumer products with digital twins, and they'll be tradable. You'll have an option to get it physically delivered immediately or get the digital twin to redeem later. And then, of course, you will have many yielding assets. So NFTs are bearer instruments. They are proof of ownership of something in a metasphere or just on a chain. And you can use those to lend. You can use those to stake to earn revenue. And that will be a major, I think, economic activity on the blockchain. So those sort of 3 broad things I would say are things that your audience should just be thinking about and observing.
Okay, and do you own any NFTs? Do you own any NFTs? And if you do, which one would you recommend?
NFT. I think at one point I owned 100,000 crypto kitties because we had a marketplace and we were selling them. So I'm sure I was the largest owner of crypto kitties ever. And then I own many thousands of NFTs because we're constantly doing NFT drops. You
personally, do you buy any, like say, look, I'm buying this NFT, I like this NFT?
Those are mine and my partner's accounts.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we always buy during the drops. And so, I own a lot of NFTs. I own a lot of viral NFTs linked to merchandise. I'm in this business. So I also, remember Wax was the first to invent the concept of a pack of NFTs that then many of the other blockchains said, oh, wow, that looks interesting. We call them Wax packs. So I will send Wax packs. It could be Topps trading card company. I got some Topps. I got the drop too. I got the first drop. Those are fun. The baseball card packs. The Street Fighter. There's just a bunch. And it's one way I get people to see how fun it is, right? You send them to them, they open it up, they see what they got, they can immediately sell it or trade it. That is, I own a lot and probably will continue to own a lot. We just did yesterday we did an NFT drop of Blade Runner as a collectible. Not that many. I think we only minted 150 of them, but they were all snapped up in like 2 or 3 seconds. So, nostalgic kind of properties are a perfect application of NFTs.
Yeah, I love that. Well, listen, I think that's been a great overview of what you guys are doing at Wax, a great overview of the NFT space beforehand, what's about to happen, the possibilities. If there's any doubt, I feel like this is the podcast that people need to listen to. And so I thank you for obviously adding so much value and dropping so much gems. I'm sure the listeners, the watchers are going to enjoy this. Thank you for your time and coming on.
Thank you, Sean. It was fun.
Where can people find yourself? Where's the best if they want to contact you or Wax? Where's
so there's wax.io. Wax.io is the website. I'm Twitter. It's William E. Quigley as my handle on Twitter. A lot of people DM me.
Yeah, me too.
All of them. I get back to most. And those are the two places you can kind of interact with us.
Cool. Well, thank you for your time. Everyone stay listening and stay blessed.